This happened in the early 90s when I was a junior in high school and was home on Christmas break. It was in the middle of a weekday and I was home alone when the phone rang. When I answered, a man asked for me by my first and last name. He then said, "This is Randy." Whatever else he was saying was unintelligible, but the last part he said was, "company," and I was calling too. I tried to interrupt to have him repeat his name and company again. He said it very quickly and unclearly, but he ignored my question and asked if I had been looking for a job. I wasn't, but I was young and sort of wanted to see what the job was going to be, so I hedged a bit. Randy then told me that he was hiring models for commercials and that someone had given him my name. I laughed because number one, that sounded completely fake, and number two, I wasn't exactly swimming in model contracts. When I told him that I believed he must be mistaken, he replied, "No, I think you're very pretty, Tessa." While that comment may not seem that disturbing, it stopped me in my tracks. He had initially said that I'd been recommended to him, but now he was speaking as if he had seen me. At that moment, I just knew in my gut that something was very wrong. Unfortunately, I had not yet learned to get my brain and my gut on the same page, so while I wasn't buying any of what he was selling, in order to be polite, and maybe, just in case there was some cash and an ego boost to be had, I said, "Okay, how about you just give me your number and I'll talk to my parents and get back to you." I knew if he was legit, he'd have no problem giving me his number. Also, my brother had been asked to do a commercial or a print ad or something a few years before. I knew that my parents had to sign some forms because he was underage, but of course, Randy failed both of my tests. He resisted giving me his number or allowing me time to talk to my parents. He encouraged me just to agree right then. So I promptly said, "No thank you," and I hung up. Within seconds of hanging up, the phone rang again. When I answered, I'll never forget what he asked me. He started asking me about different sexual acts. That escalated quickly as I stood stunned in silence. He repeated a question and then moved on to similar ones. What made it unnerving, besides the obvious, was that it didn't sound like a prank call at all. Even though his comments were sexual, he sounded almost angry. I was safe in my home and it was just a phone call, but it made me feel like I was in danger. I hung up, of course, but he called continuously, so continuously in fact, that every time I tried to pick up the phone to call my mom, he would either be on the line when I picked up the phone, or the phone would begin ringing again. By this point, I wasn't answering the phone, and if he was on the line when I picked up, I would hang up quickly, but he was getting angrier and angrier. His comments were taking a darker turn. What started as asking me invasive sexual questions had turned into comments about how he'd like to harm me. I was finally able to get through to my mom, and she called the police. They didn't seem to take it really seriously, or even act like they could do much. I didn't recognize his voice, and it wasn't a teenager. It was obviously a grown man. They felt that it was just someone messing with me, and it would just fade out on its own. And for a time, I guess, it seemed like they were right. That first day, he called constantly for a few more hours, but then the call stopped, and although it was very disturbing, it seemed to be over. Some time passed and I quit thinking about it, but then spring break rolled around. It was the same scenario as before. I was home from school on a weekday, and I was alone. The phone rang, and when I answered, he launched straight into the vile sexual talk. I hung up and we began the same cycle as before, with him calling constantly and me trying to time it just right so I could pick up the phone between calls and call my mom. Every time I hung up on him, he got angrier and the things he said became more foul. This time, he started reciting my address and talking about paying me a visit. Not only did it feel very threatening, but it was so confusing. Who in the world was doing this? Why would a grown man I didn't know make these calls? Not just once, but 2 times months apart. How did he have so much information about me? None of it made any sense. When I was finally able to call my mom, she called the police again. The officer took it a bit more seriously. They asked if we wanted to put a tap on the phone. We agreed. They told us that the process is as follows. It would take 24 hours to get with the phone company and get it active. Once active, it would be there for 60 days. If there were no issues in 60 days, it would be removed. But if there were an issue, then we'd have him. Just like before, the calls continued throughout the afternoon, but they had stopped by the time my parents got home. I got some the next morning after my parents had left for work, but by the time the 24 window had passed, they had stopped, and once again, things were quieter for another few months. This cycle continued over the course of the next year. It was quiet until midsummer, then again until Christmas break of my senior year, and when he called, the pattern was almost always the same. The calls usually started out with him being more polite, but as soon as I recognized his voice and hung up, they became progressively more angry and violent. They always came when I was alone and began continuing the exact moment that my mom or dad pulled into the driveway. We would put the tap back on the phone each time, but the calls never continued for more than 24 hours in a stretch, and there was always at least 60 days in between episodes. The content of the calls, however, got increasingly more personal. He would regularly mention my address and eventually began talking about my clothing. But then he started mentioning things that I owned but didn't actually wear. This obviously took our level of fear up a notch. By this point, because he would call right up until someone else got home, we knew he had to be in a position to see our driveway. But every day after school, I would let myself in the side door using a key that was hidden outside. It was extremely well hidden, and you'd have to be positioned in just the right spot to ever get to see me use it. But if you were hiding and watching, then it was possible. It became impossible not to think he may have been in our house, in my room, and that thought was simply unbearable. We obviously stopped leaving a key outside, but the very nature of the cycle, short bursts of intense contact, followed by months of nothing, made it hard to know what to do. He clearly knew how to avoid the trace. He was motivated enough to keep contacting me over such a long period of time, and he was controlled enough to wait for long stretches in between calls. I had never been someone who scared easily, and my dad didn't want me to lose that. He started keeping the guns in the house loaded and taking me to the shooting range. After Christmas, a quiet few months passed as always. I had stayed alert for a week or two, and then I quit thinking about it. On the first day of my summer break, I was home and in a great mood when the phone rang. Expecting a call from my best friend, I said, "Hello?" And I heard, "I'm calling about the job you applied for. This is Randy," followed by more unintelligible words. I actually had been applying for jobs, but as I said to the man, "From where?" it hit me that this was the exact conversation we had the first time he called. I hung up and prepared myself for another awful day. The calls kept coming and, as usual, in the process of trying to call my mom, I would end up on the phone with him. The things he would say got worse after every quiet spell, and by this time, he was describing how he was going to murder me. More than the things he was saying, the rage in his voice triggered a real fear in me. I was having trouble getting the line open long enough to call my mom. I knew he was watching close enough to be watching the house. I got the gun out of the closet, and I sat there by the ringing phone. I was wanting to call my mom, but I wasn't wanting the chance to hear his voice again. I wasn't panicky, but I was crying and definitely scared. And then I was done. Just simply done. I picked up the phone and he launched into his sick spiel, trying to get as much in as he could before I hung up again. But I didn't hang up. I'm not sure why. I didn't have a plan, but I sat there silent for a few minutes and let him talk. And when he said that he could be at my house in less than 2 minutes, without thinking about it for a second, I said, "Come on over, the door's open." I then hung up the phone, walked over and unlocked and opened the front door, leaving just the screen door closed. With my gun in my hands, I sat down on the couch facing the door and waited. He never came, and he never called again. There is zero doubt in my mind that if he had walked onto that porch, I would have shot him, without hesitation. I still have no idea who it was, or why, or whether it would have escalated beyond phone calls. I went off to college, and my parents eventually moved out of that house, so I suppose it will forever be a mystery. I trust that God will give him what he deserves, but I definitely learned that people who feed off your fear disappear quickly when you quit being afraid.
If you really like my content and want to support me, please like this video and click the subscribe button. It helps me to grow my channel and is essential in reaching a wider audience. Most of you watching my videos aren't subscribed to my channel, and that's why my animations can't reach their full potential. They aren't recommended to more people who would surely love my content as much as you do. You can always unsubscribe at any moment. Thank you in advance, and enjoy the rest of the video.
About 10 years ago, when I was 12 years old, my family took a trip out east to visit some other family that lived out there. My aunt and uncle offered us to stay at their place because it was decently big and it was just the two of them living there after all of their kids had moved out. It was an old house in a nice little neighborhood, and it had a woods in the backyard. After we arrived there were 2 empty bedrooms. My parents got the larger one, and I took the smaller one. I remember we walked around the city the first day and met up with some other family. Then we went back to their house. The next night, my parents, aunt, and uncle were all invited with a few people to dinner. When I realized I would be the only kid at the dinner, they told me I could stay home for the few hours. I was happy with this because I would rather play on my Xbox than be bored with a bunch of adults. There was a TV in my room, which was a pretty nice one, and after they left, I started playing Call of Duty. About 20 minutes in, I heard a car door shut, which sounded like it was coming from the driveway. I went over and looked out my second-floor window down to the driveway. The sun was setting, so it was kind of hard to see, but I saw a car parked on the side of the street between my aunt and uncle's house and the neighbors next door. A man had gotten out of the car and started walking up the driveway. I didn't recognize him, but I figured he was some sort of door-to-door salesman. I was definitely not going to answer the door, but I continued to watch him, all the way until he arrived at the front door. But when the man got to the front door, he didn't knock. He appeared to just look inside, and then walked around the side of the house towards the back. Suddenly, I got a bad feeling. Why would this man want to go into the backyard? The only details I could really make out about him is that he was wearing a black jacket and jeans with a camouflage baseball cap. I went out of the room and into the bathroom across the hall, which had a little window in it overlooking the backyard. I looked around for the man, and then I saw him. He was walking fairly close to the house and went to the back door. I saw him look inside of it and then appear to try the handle. To my surprise, I saw the door open and the man walk right inside. I think I went into shock for a couple of seconds when I saw this, because I really didn't think the door would be left unlocked. I heard noise coming from downstairs, the sound of the man coming inside. I didn't have a cell phone at the time, and the only house phone I knew of was downstairs. So I ran back into my bedroom and hid under my bed. I hoped the man wouldn't come upstairs and would just leave. I could sort of hear noises from downstairs of the man moving around. He seemed to be walking around near the kitchen and the living room. Then I heard him start to walk up the stairs. This scared me more than anything. He got up the stairs and walked down the hall. I heard him open a door nearby, and then the door next to my room. Finally, my door got opened. I held my breath as it did, but as quickly as it opened, it was shut. I didn't know if the man was inside my room or outside, because I was facing the wall, until finally I heard the door to my uncle's bedroom open. The man appeared to stay in there for a while, and then walked back down the hallway and downstairs again. I kept hiding under the bed and hoped he wouldn't come back upstairs. I was feeling slightly relieved until I heard the footsteps come back up the stairs once again. They seemingly stopped directly in front of the bedroom door that I was in. Then came one of the scariest moments of my life. I heard the man on the other side of the door say, "I know you're in there and under the bed." Then the man told me to come out in a very creepy way. I didn't move, however, probably because I was frozen with fear. I was thinking of what I could possibly do when I heard a voice come from downstairs. It was the voice of another man, and he was yelling. I heard him say, "Hey," and "What's going on?" I heard the man upstairs, then walk back down to the base of the stairs and down them. I stayed in hiding. I heard some yelling come from downstairs, and then heard the voice of the second man yell he had called the police. About 10 minutes later of me shaking under the bed, I heard sirens and the police entered the house. I came out and talked to a lady police officer about what happened. The man that had broken in had left, but the other man had stayed. He turned out to be the next door neighbor. My parents arrived about 20 minutes later. I was told that the next door neighbor had seen the suspicious man enter the house and went inside to investigate. When he saw that the man had broken in, he yelled at him. The man that had broken into the house used to work for my uncle and had been fired about a year earlier. It was truly a miracle that the neighbor came in the house when he did, because he possibly saved my life. In the fall of 2018, I was going into my junior year of college. After living in the dorms for the first 2 years, I decided to rent a house with a few of my friends. We attended a very large and old college, and this house was sort of run down and very old, but it was close to the campus and cheap, so we were more than happy to rent it. There was going to be 4 of us living there total, and when we first got the place, we all moved some furniture in and then went back home. When August came around, I was the first one to move back into the house for the school year, and the others were going to move in the next week. I moved the rest of my stuff in, then had the whole place to myself for a few days. It was a house with 2 floors and a basement, and for the most part was a typical run-down old college house. The first night when I got back, I was too tired to really do anything and just went to bed. The next day I mostly just played video games, but at night I decided to go all around the house and make sure everything was good, because none of us had been there for a couple of months. I went upstairs and on the main floor, and then went down into the basement. The basement was unfinished, and we really didn't have a plan on using it for anything. It had hardly any lighting at all, and was just overall not a very livable space. When I got down there, I turned on a light, and saw what appeared to be something moving from about 20 feet away. I didn't get a good look at it at all as to what it was. I was afraid it could possibly be a rat, so I took out my flashlight on my phone and looked around. I went all around the basement slowly, but didn't see anything at all. But when I was on the wall next to the stairs, I heard the sound of something falling. I looked over and saw an empty box that had fallen over. It was a rather large box, and I didn't understand how this could happen. It gave me the chills, and without hesitating, I ran back for the stairs and all the way up. Once I got upstairs, I shut the door and stood there. I wasn't sure what to do. I told myself I was 20 years old and I shouldn't be afraid of this. I didn't know if there was some sort of animal downstairs, or worse yet, a person. I decided to text my friends who had lived there about the situation. As I got out my phone, I heard the sound of a woman screaming coming from downstairs. It sounded extremely disturbing. I literally ran all the way upstairs to my bedroom and then called the police. I told them what I had heard and what I had seen, and they said they would send somebody over right away. I sat in my bedroom with the door locked, sitting on my bed. As I did, I heard a door open from downstairs, and then another door slam shut violently. I slowly went out of my room to look around and see if anything was down there, but I didn't see anything at all. The police arrived a few minutes later. They came in and searched the entire house, but couldn't find anybody at all. We all assumed whoever it was left. I just don't know how they got in there or who it was, and to know that I lived there for a whole day with somebody possibly living in the basement really creeps me out. This story took place in December of last year. My parents took my sisters to my aunt's house, about 30 minutes away from mine, and I didn't want to go, so my parents left me home alone with my dog. It was around 8:30 p.m. and in the winter time, so it was already pitch black by now. I was in the middle of playing a game on my TV in my room when I heard a noise. This was unusual, but being the 15-year-old that I was, I decided not to pay any attention to it. A few minutes later, though, I heard another noise, but it sounded closer. This time I decided to pause my game and go investigate a bit. I did a full sweep of the house and found nothing. This sort of creeped me out, but there wasn't much I could do, so I just went back and kept playing. Some time went by, and I recall the time being around 10:20 p.m. My dog had come up to me and started getting all excited and jumping around for a bit. This was her way of saying that she needed to go to the bathroom, which meant I had to let her outside and then let her back inside when she was done. I was skeptical about this, but I hesitantly took her out to the back of the house to go and let her out. I was about to open the back door when I suddenly got this fearful urge to go and look out the window first. I cautiously looked out the window, making sure to only move the blinds by centimeters. I saw nothing at first, but when I looked at the back of my yard, what I saw made my blood turn to ice. It was a man in his late 30s with a scruffy beard and long, disgusting hair, looking right at me. I took my dog, locked the door, ran upstairs, and went into the bathroom. Then I locked the door there. I called my parents, and they were home in 20 minutes. The cops were called, but they never found the guy. I still wonder to this day what would have happened if I didn't look out the window first.
Back when I was 17, my first real girlfriend texted me one night to be like, "Parents are on a date night. Come over and we'll have the place to ourselves." Yep, the text that every young man waits for, the one that makes everything around you glow in gold while you hear the voice of God saying, "My son, you have been chosen. Now go forth and multiply." I've been planning on a night of Modern Warfare 3 with the boys, but within minutes, I was in the shower scrubbing the enamel off my teeth in order to become a little mint, drowning myself in cologne and raiding my brother's rubber stash for an entire platoon's worth. I remember texting her like, "Want me to bring anything over? I got a few Red Barons." And she just replied, "Nah, just bring yourself." What a feeling, dude. Girlfriend is home alone and all she wants delivered is me. So I rushed to finish off getting dressed, spent like 5 straight minutes in the mirror making sure I looked fresh and clean, so fresh and so clean, and then I was ready to go. The walk over to my girlfriend's place took like 20 minutes, so from the time of getting the text to me actually arriving, couldn't have been any more than an hour. She had one of those long driveways too, not like some southern manor house or anything like that, but enough so you got a long look at the house as you were walking up to it. Then right as I'm about halfway up the driveway, I see someone walking through one of the upstairs bedrooms who was definitely not my girlfriend. I stop dead in my tracks, look up at this guy, and I've got this weird mix of anger and confusion and just utterly feeling a little bit heartbroken. I whip out my phone, dial my girlfriend's number, only to find her phone is switched off. My head is just swimming with negative thoughts. I think I was about to have a panic attack, like I just couldn't believe she'd do that to me. I was checking if I had the right house, double-checking the upstairs bedroom, like 100% certain that I'd just seen someone, but also telling myself, no way, I must be hallucinating or something. But nope. That same dude in the green hoodie walks through her parents' bedroom again, like all the way in and then all the way out. But on the way out, he sees me and he stops and stares at me. He's looking at me like, who are you, my guy? Where I'm looking at him like, me? Who are you? But as I'm looking, I notice there's something weird about his face. It's all distorted. And then it hits me that his face is all distorted because he's wearing, like, literal pantyhose over his head, like a meme of a bank robber or something. Then right as I'm thinking, like, what kind of weird stuff is this? I'm like, oh no, he's not a meme. He's literally robbing the place. I just panicked and ran back down the driveway before dialing 911. But then, as I'm giving the operator all the details, I realized that my arrival might have prompted something bad to happen to my girlfriend. I ended up running back up the driveway, kicking on the door and shouting up at the window, "Cops are on their way, you better get out of there." I added a few expletives, but I won't say them here. I didn't hear anyone shouting back. In fact, I couldn't hear anything going on inside at all. But that didn't mean there wasn't anything going on. The intruders, home invaders, whatever you want to call them, they could have been doing anything to my girlfriend in there. And that's if they hadn't done something irreversible already. Waiting those few minutes for the cops to arrive was agony, but the dispatcher promised me that they'd roll up with their lights and sirens blaring to try and scare the intruders off. We later found out that worked like a charm, but no one realized that until we were inside and my girlfriend was safe. She was scared to death, but she was okay, and it turned out that my timing had been absolutely impeccable. The two guys that broke in through the rear door of the house had only just tied her up in her bedroom and were right in the middle of ransacking the house when I showed up. And yes, they were actually wearing pantyhose. Seems kind of ridiculous, but the cops told me it's the smart choice for home invaders, I guess. You get pulled over with a ski mask in your passenger seat in Florida, questions are going to be asked. But a pair of pantyhose, you could just shrug it off and say, oh, that's just Mima's laundry day, or something, and there's no probable cause. Needless to say, when the cops left, we were way too shaken up for any alone time, and my girlfriend was in no mood to hang out at a place that had just gotten broken into, so we ended up going back to my parents' place to hang out. Nothing in the way of privacy, so I didn't get the explosive evening I'd been hoping for, but still, it was just cool to have been the one to have saved her, as she put it. I didn't save anyone. Those dudes only bailed when the cops showed up, but still, you can bet I took all the credit she wanted to give me. We ended up dating until maybe our sophomore year of college. After that, neither of us could handle the distance, but we still keep in touch, and I'm pretty sure our little post-relationship friend status is rooted solely in that mild shared trauma of having confronted a pair of home invaders together.